Namaste, world raisers. Sabine and Roger here. Let's watch Ashoka the Great, Rise of the Mauryan Empire Documentary. It was a request by our world yogi, Paro. Thank you.
The 3rd century BC was a notoriously violent time, filled with titanic clashes and amazing personalities. Alexander's conquests gave way to a period of constant warfare between his Seleucid, Ptolemaic and Antigonid successors, while the rising Roman juggernaut began a series of conquests to unite the Italian Peninsula and fought its Carthaginian rival, paving the way for future dominance. India during this period was also experiencing revolutionary change, which culminated in the rise of the Mauryan Empire and the reign of Ashoka the Great. In 326 BC, Alexander the Great crossed the Hindu Kush mountains and entered India for the first time, calling his veteran army to a halt at the Indus River and demanding that 2 rival kings in the region, Omphis and Porus, come to him and submit. Omphis of Taxila surrendered to Alexander, but Porus of Purava resisted and forced Alexander into a climactic battle at the Hydaspes River, which he won nonetheless. Wishing to conquer all India, Alexander marched onward, but his army mutinied at the Hyphasis River and he was forced to withdraw to Babylon. Their refusal to march on was in part due to rumours of a massive Indian kingdom possessing innumerable legions further to the east. This was the Nanda Empire, centred on the Magadha region, which supposedly fielded a colossal force of 250,000 infantry, cavalry, chariots and war elephants. Though he had retreated, Alexander's conquests had destabilised northern India, a fact which would play a key role in what was to come. Once the historical shroud falls away once again, we see in 320 BC that it was a man named Chandragupta Maurya who stood victorious. This Indian conqueror's origins are not clear, but less favourable Brahmin sources state that he was a Shudra, a peasant or serf, whilst more favourable Buddhist texts designate him as a member of the prestigious Kshatriya or warrior caste. He likely knew about Alexander's stunning conquests and was given a crash course in ancient warfare, tactics and geopolitics, which he would use to conquer his own empire. Having gathered followers, he initially attacked the Nanda Empire's capital, but failed a few times. Then he changed his tactics and conquered the northwestern lands, which had been weakened by Alexander, using his subsequent control of these prosperous regions to cut off supplies to the capital, resulting in the fall of the Nanda dynasty. After establishing his realm, he fought, decisively defeated, and made an alliance with Seleucus, famously gifting him 500 war elephants in exchange for peace and the hand of Seleucus's daughter in marriage. Chandragupta's successor, Bindusara, continued his father's wise domestic and foreign policies, such as his friendship with Seleucus and his religious tolerance. In addition, he thrust south into the Deccan Plateau and expanded the empire. It is the second of Bindusara's 3 sons who is the subject of this video, Ashoka, whose eldest brother was Suzima and whose youngest brother was Tissia. It seemed as though the future Mauryan emperor at this point had no chance of ever inheriting the throne. For one, his mother, Superdrangi, was a commoner, while the crown prince and favourite child, Suzima's mother, was a royal princess. Nevertheless, Indian princes were often sent to govern faraway provinces, and Ashoka was no different. At the age of 18, the young Mauryan royal was sent to the cosmopolitan Silk Road hub of Taxila to quell a revolt, a task he supposedly accomplished quickly. The nature of Taxila as a scholarly and cosmopolitan settlement, where intellectual debates were often had among different faiths, would have improved Ashoka's knowledge of the world, as well as making him more tolerant and sophisticated. His next appointment was at the important city of Ujjaini, capital of Avanti province. The high quality of the governorship that Ashoka provided is shown by the fact that he was entrusted with this station, that of administering a crucial region connecting the capital city and the coast. It was in this new station that Ashoka fell in love with Devi, the daughter of a trader. Interestingly, she was a member of the Sakya clan, the clan of Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha himself. It is widely thought that she was a Buddhist upon bearing Ashoka his 2 children, their son Mahendra and their daughter Sanghamitra. This relatively peaceful life would come to an end when in 274 BC, Emperor Bindusara passed away. What happened next is the subject of much debate, but it is thought that a brief 4-year civil war occurred between Ashoka and his brothers. By acting decisively and swiftly occupying the capital city, and because he was supported by his father's ministers, Ashoka reigned victorious over his brother and was crowned as emperor in 270 BC, the same year Hannibal Barca was born in Carthage. After he had ascended to the throne, Ashoka continued a policy of expansion and conquest. One of the reasons for this persistent policy of warfare was that in this period all Indian rulers wished to be regarded as the Chakravartin, the king of kings, by their royal rivals. Practical and economic reasons were also important, as taxes were the Mauryan Empire's main source of revenue. The more land a king conquered, the more taxes he gained. However, the more administrative and military expenses would also pile up, leading to an endless cycle of violence. So it was that in the year 262 BC, the massive Mauryan army marched into the kingdom of Kalinga. Their past successes would likely have made them confident of an easy victory, but the king and his army faced a tough, grinding conflict against a doggedly courageous enemy. It is said that Ashoka eventually won the war, not because Kalinga surrendered, but because the carnage was so terrible. After the final battle, the victorious monarch stood amongst his dead and dying foes on the battlefield. Most monarchs would have simply rejoiced in the grim victory, but Ashoka, in this moment, felt horror and remorse. It ended up being the key moment of his life. Supposedly, 150,000 were therefrom captured, 100,000 were slain, and many times that died from famine and disease. More than just being horrified by the direct results of the devastation he had wrought, Ashoka also was acutely aware of the tragedy that struck those left behind, the young sons left without fathers, and poor mothers who had been robbed of their sons, their families and loved ones. The educated and sensitive Ashoka appears to have been made truly aware of the real cost of war, even admitting publicly what no victorious ruler ever had before, that he felt remorse on having conquered Kalinga, declaring that even 100th or 1000th part of those who were slain, died or captured in Kalinga is considered regrettable by the beloved of the gods. This was clearly not the same man speaking who had annihilated his brother and had seized the throne by blood. Rather, it was a changed man, finally admitting to his mistakes and thinking on the futility and tragedy of war. Henceforth, said the king, he was not going to be provoked into bearing arms again, and also dedicated his life and huge wealth towards building a society where people lived by the rules of virtue and good moral behavior. This abrupt change of heart gradually led Ashoka to the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, who had preached the same values of peace, non-violence and benevolence 2 centuries earlier. Ashoka had likely known of Buddhism from an early age, as his wife was an adherent of the Buddha's teachings and the faith was popular within certain segments of the population. However, he was the first king in history to convert to this apparently revolutionary religion. Contrary to what popular legends depict, Ashoka did not instantly convert to Buddhism after his change of heart on the field of war, but thoughtfully and practically chose a slow path which would benefit both him and the welfare of his subjects. Particular care was taken to remain tolerant of the 2 other dominant Indian religions, the Hindu Brahmanic faith and Jainism. In one of his major edicts, carved on a rock, he stated that should one blame other religions or overglorify one's own religion, they are instead doing harm to it, an act which should not be done. He began to study under Buddhist monks, and 2 years later was accepted into the Sangha, the Buddhist order. His tutor was a monk named Bhikkhu Upagupta of Mathura, who took the king on a pilgrimage of all the important sites in their shared faith, such as Lumbini, where Siddhartha Gautama had been born, Bodh Gaya, where he had achieved enlightenment, Sarnath, where he had delivered his first lecture, and Kushinagar, where he had died and gained nirvana. At all of these places and more, Ashoka erected pillars and carved rocks with his edicts and royal orders. These proclamations were routinely read out to the illiterate population by the empire's officials, and appeared to be personal messages from Ashoka himself, clearly in his own words. It is also as though the king's voice speaks to us 2,500 years later when we read them today. His change in faith also changed his role as the king. Rather than desiring material gain, which so many kings had in the past, he now sought that his children obtain every kind of welfare, both in this and the next world, and dictated that reporters could come to him with the people's business wherever he might be at whatever time. Despite all of this piety and benevolence, we must always keep in mind that Ashoka was an emperor above all else, not a religious teacher or a philosopher. He had the duty of running an empire, and this was not always a job which led to peaceful outcomes. There was a serious danger that once Ashoka's supposed pacifism had been announced, the provinces would rebel and neighbouring kings would invade, sensing weakness in the Mauryan leadership. However, the emperor, while he had given up on aggressive conquest, would reluctantly but fiercely defend his empire and refused to disband his army. Every rebellion would still be put down brutally, and any foreign invader would be met with devastating military force, a fact which he made clear. To his own subjects, he also remained an almost stern, father-like figure, benevolent and caring, but willing to inflict severe punishment if necessary, though his engravings almost appear to plead with his people not to force him to inflict these penalties. For example, the forest people, or Adivasi, were told that despite Ashoka's remorse, he still had the power and will to punish them for their injustices if necessary. They should, he said, be ashamed of their wrongs, lest they be killed. Overall, historian A.L. Basham stated that while Ashoka could seemingly be a bit naive, he was still indefatigable, strong-willed, and imperious. Ashoka also worked hard to change the attitude of his subjects, not to force Buddhism onto them, but to spread his universally right values. The emperor, who had previously enjoyed pleasure trips of hunting and had wielded a mighty sword, now went on Dhamma yatras, or pious pilgrimage tours, during which he visited holy sites and met his subjects. He frequently talked to local people to make sure they were happy, and would hear their compliments or complaints about local officials. In this way, he was the first Indian king to think of the welfare of the poor, rather than just using them for tax revenue.
Really?
As he stated, the finest conquest is the conquest of right, and not might. The values he sought to spread were known as Ashoka's Dhamma, a complex term which essentially were rules of good behaviour in this particular context. For example, Ashoka wished that people would be obedient to parents and teachers, should behave properly towards holy men, relatives, servants, friends and the poor, and should be kind and generous to the old and vulnerable. Non-violence towards all living creatures, be they humans, birds or animals, was practiced. One edict in particular goes into detail about how the imperial kitchens will no longer slaughter vast amounts of animals for food. In addition to preaching these noble virtues to his people, Ashoka also sought to try his best to live by the same tenets. This was exemplified by his thoughtfulness in the construction and renovation of infrastructure. He ordered that shade trees be planted along roads for shelter from the sun and rains, that mango groves be planted in order to provide food, and that watering places be dug to quench a traveller's thirst. In 253 BC, a great gathering of Buddhist monks was held at Pataliputra, hosted by the king himself. At this, the Third Buddhist Council, a momentous decision was taken to send teams of bhikshus, Buddhist monks to other foreign kingdoms in order to spread the teachings of the Buddha. These missionaries are said to have reached as far as Kashmir, Gandhara, the Greek Hellenistic kingdoms, North Africa, Burma, and Sri Lanka. One of the travellers was a man named Dharmarakshita and is designated as Yona or Ionian in the texts, so it is possible he was a Greek convert. The most famous missionary of the period, however, was Prince Mahendra, Ashoka's firstborn son. In 249 BC, Mahendra journeyed to Sri Lanka, then called Tamrapani, at the invitation of King Devanampiya Tissa, an admirer of Ashoka and a man who wished to learn more of Buddhist principles. The subsequent mission to this realm was so successful that it gradually became a Buddhist country and remains so even today. Such was the legacy of Ashoka the Great. When he died in 232 BC, he was 72 years old and had reigned for 38 glorious years. Though his death would instigate the long decay of his earthly Mauryan Empire, which fell after another half-century, Ashoka had ruled over the largest indigenous empire in India.
Wow, that's a lot of sponsors. It must be a big channel.
He's got a ton of YouTube members and patrons. Good job.
Wow, how big is his channel?
I don't know.
Oh, 2.5 million subscribers.
Whoa,
Okay.
2.4 million. Yeah,
I didn't even check before.
Those are great.
Yes, so I think that was pretty well researched then.
Yeah, totally. So definitely
Well,
looks like he knew what he was talking about.
that was a fantastic video. Like, really well done. I mean, the information, there are probably thousands of different theories out there.
Yeah.
But I'm sure he picked, like, the most authentic and...
Yeah, it looks like it was really well researched. But I do know that there's various interpretations and views on Ashoka, but there was some things that, I definitely wasn't aware of. We have watched an Ashoka documentary before a long time ago. So
Probably.
Sabina wouldn't remember.
No.
She doesn't have the best memory, but I do. And this shone some light on, some facts that I didn't know, like his son, going down to Sri Lanka and spreading it there, right? So I didn't know that, his son was a big Buddhist after that, and that I didn't know that he was the one that instigated the spread, of Buddhism into the neighboring lands.
It kind of rings a bell, yeah.
Yeah, and some people really say that, because I mentioned Ashoka in one of our early videos, and then and then people really came out and said that he was actually a Buddhist before that big war where he felt remorse for the first time, because I thought that he only became a Buddhist after. But this one didn't really say. It said that his wife was Buddhist, but it doesn't mean that he was. But he really, dived into the Buddhist teachings after that feeling of remorse. But anyways, it's all history, right? It's open to interpretation and debate. But I think the message of his life and story is, embracing, Buddhism as its own philosophy and religious, structure, and then really jumping into those teachings and practicing the Dharma and having that wisdom and understanding that he didn't suppress and quell, the other religions and other faiths at the time. He actually supported them, saying that if you're suppressing others' beliefs and faiths, then you're not really truly understanding your own that well, right? Because, Buddhism is all about, the internal path and overcoming the obscurations, the delusion, the anger, the lust, the greed, the hate, all of the negative emotions that arise within. We got to transcend that. And it's only through that. So whether you call that, philosophy or spirituality or raising your consciousness or awareness, foundationally, it's the main focus and path of all religions and spiritual traditions, as the essence of getting to the heart of who we truly are. Like, we're not the mentally constructed identity, the labels, the egos, the psychological thinking mind. There's an awareness and a consciousness that is just, boom, it's there. And we all have it, right? And ultimately, so we're all one in that regard, no matter what identity we choose to identify with, right?
Yeah. I think this actually fits perfectly now into the series that we're watching. Just finishing the Ramayana, and there's a lot of war in the Ramayana.
Oh yeah.
If you watched it, I wasn't very impressed by that, or not impressed, but I struggled with the idea of war is necessary. Let's put it that way. But this also just showed it too. Like even though, he transformed and there was like compassion arising and wisdom arising. And yet when the time came that he had to protect his kingdom or whatever.
The kingdom, the empire.
Then he went out and protected it, even if it means murdering people. Which is really interesting. And what actually changed my view a little bit the other day, me complaining about, all this war, why? Then someone said in the comment section, well, the Buddhists protected their Dharma too, through...
through those means, right?
Through those means. And then it's just struck me, and it's like, oh my God, this is so true. I totally forgot about that. Which is true, and we know the one story. Shall we share it with Garchen? Yeah, it's in a documentary.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah, Garchen Rinpoche, so a famous Tibetan Buddhist Lama, he's still alive, right? He's still with us today. And yeah, you can just see he's a highly realized being, right? But anyways, during the Tibetan, revolution where China invaded and all that happened, he took up arms and he defended his homeland. So even though highly realized Buddhist Lama, he still defended his land and his Dharma and his way of life and his fellow Sangha, and ended up in, of course, the prison of war camp. And then, so there's a documentary that talks all about it. But took up arms. So anyways, and let's just be realistic. War is an ongoing thing in our world, right? So not surprisingly, way back then, there was all sorts of, wars and conquests all over the place. So this was fascinating just to hear about, the different kingdoms within India, and then all, having their, defending their own kingdoms. And then one gigantic one was eventually formed. By Ashoka and then his, fathers, and so that dynasty, but still there is the potentiality, for peace, but it has to come from within, right? So the outside world, it's like a divine display. It's the Leela, it's the potentiality manifesting into actuality. And so it's the conventional world. So our conventional existence is very dependent on our separated form bodies, perceiving, outside of ourselves as separate. So people who have a different religion or a different belief system or a different skin color, for that matter, a different race or nationality. So all of these borders, they just divide us and separate us, right? And then, of course, there's bound to be conflict, different languages even. So then we see other beings who, in essence, are mirrors of us, the exact same thing. Like humanity is one creation. Human is one being, one thing, one species, right? But because our psychological mind creates all of these separate identities, then those become our conventional reality. But ultimately, no, there's just one, right? So
I would like to keep talking a little bit about the war and why I have such a problem with it. Because I've been reflecting, it's like, why do I have such a problem with it? And I think because, my background is Buddhist, and it seemed to me always that violence is a total no-go, and until you're highly realized and then use it as a skillful means, like as a bodhisattva, but until that point, you just you are not supposed to be violent. Like, you're not supposed to be violent. So that's how I understood the thing. And then all these stories about all the saints just being gentle and sweet and kind and peaceful and not going out there and trying to change anything. And then it wasn't Gandhi all about nonviolence too?
Yeah. Oh,
the
yeah.
whole thing.
Totally.
It's like complete nonviolence, putting everything down. And so I don't know, for me that is a totally valid path. And now I'm like, now like Rama goes trying to save Sita, killing all these people for one woman. It's like, but anyways, so please bear with me, because I'm trying to understand and not, so I'm trying to understand, and eventually it will purify itself and I will understand this beautiful divine play. But that's why I just want to keep touching on it, because it's obviously all about war here too.
So
any comment?
So you guys let us know in the comment section what your view is, and maybe some insights for Sabina, and I'm going to touch on it a little bit, and then but add to it. Let's keep this discussion going kindly, right? So war is a part of life. So I have one teacher, he said that wars have been going on for like 99% of the evolution of humans on this planet. It's just a constant thing, and it's really based on the separate identities and not seeing the oneness. So what happens, so even with Ravana and Rama, like when we see Rama and even Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita trying to avert the war of Kurukshetra, and then Rama trying to get Sita back, it's all about upholding virtue, right? So these divine beings, in the sense that they do everything they could, like even Hanuman went to Ravana and said, hey, please release Sita, and then Rama just wants Sita back, and then we'll leave you alone. Even though, you're not a nice guy, right? And then so even still willing to just, I want Sita back because she's my wife and I gotta do what a husband does, and on, right? And even Krishna given them all the opportunities to take back out of the war. Like, war was the last resort. It always is the last resort with these divine holy beings, right? But ultimately they have to, defend the virtue and truth and justice, right? So in the world, nowadays, and in even history, even in Ashoka's time, perhaps it was more, conventional. It's about ego identities. It's about, a lot of times it's about greed and power, and acquiring more wealth for the kingdom. Like you said, it was an ongoing cycle, and you even see that with the Roman Empire and other empires. They just need to keep conquering because there's just so much cost involved. So you got to expand, and then you bring in more money, but you got to use that money for your military and all of that structure, and it needs to keep going. It's just like, reminds me of corporations also in a way. It's all about increasing the wealth, right, and the capital, because the investors invest, and then so you always got to keep increasing your market share. It's like it's got to be growing, because if it's not growing, then it's dying, and that's just how it is, right? So then, to touch on spiritual seekers, if you want to be a genuine spiritual seeker, then you can do away with, okay, well, I'm going to surrender violence, but we're not judging the conventional world for the way that it is, because that's also just a hindrance to your practice. So you see it as, okay, those are conventional, delusional ego beings identified with self and limited form identity, and they're just behaving, based on that, so not the awareness of an enlightened being or an advanced spiritual seeker, and it's all about survival. Right?
But I don't have a problem with the ignorant people leading wars. I mean, that's obvious. I have a problem with spiritual beings going into war. That's, I can't grasp yet. the ignorant people, no problem.
Yeah.
They can, of course, because they, they just follow their drive, their desires and everything.
Okay,
So I get that completely. But it's like, is it asked now of me to, I mean, we talked about that before, you making fun of it, that I don't have to become a warrior.
You don't need to go to war.
I don't have to go to war. But is it ask of me then to defend the Dharma if it's being destroyed? Like, do I have to step up if I understand all that correctly, or can I just surrender completely and just be shot?
Yeah, well, that's also an option, right? That was actually the teachings of Jesus, right? Was just
exactly. Jesus was another guy that
just surrender, and then even his early day followers, right, when they were being like fed to the lions in the Roman Colosseum, he said, "Have no fear," right? Because if you maintain a higher state of consciousness, like that's the eternal life. If you can maintain that, that faith and that devotion, onto God. Then while you're being sacrificed for fun, you're safe, because God has you, right? So, and in the sense, so I was explaining to Sabine in regards to Krishna and Rama being involved very much in war, as the incarnation of Vishnu, however you want to understand that. So God descends to, uphold and reinvigorate the Dharma and the teachings and the truth, really, but doing everything that they could to avoid war and giving the opponents chances to, learn the truth and grow, but not meant to be. But in that sense, so if Krishna and the Pandavas just backed down and said, okay, well, I guess you guys win and we'll just fade, then there's a corruption and a decay and a negativity there, because truth, is withdrawing, right? So in that sense, this would probably even be a worse realm than it is right now if it wasn't for Krishna and Rama stepping up and fighting evil, when they needed to. That was the main reason why they incarnated, was to take care of some of this really evil, negative stuff going on.
Yeah.
Right? So, I think Sabine's main problem is she's thinking she's comparing herself to God.
Excuse me?
Just kidding. But in the sense that you got to understand, the story of Rama and Krishna is God. Vishnu, the preserver, the maintainer of the universe, incarnates on this world to take care.
Oh, okay.
To take care of evil, right?
Oh, yeah.
So if they didn't do that, then this would already probably be a hell realm. The Kali Yuga would probably be, full on, and, like, who knows?
Oh.
Right?
Yeah, okay, that's...
So, they came to reestablish, Dharma.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's... that was probably the missing link in my head. It's like, they're not ordinary beings. And even though I knew that, I didn't quite realize it. Yeah, they're not ordinary beings leading an ordinary war.
Because the other thing, too, is that, so I don't want to start a big debate as to whether you believe Buddha is an incarnation of Vishnu as well. Personally, I don't see why not, So you have Krishna and Rama, boom, war necessary. They're doing their thing and they have to go fight and defeat evil. And then Buddha is also an incarnation of Vishnu, if you believe or understand that, teaching the opposite, basically, right? Teaching nonviolence, teaching renunciation, surrender, no fighting, none of that stuff. So the same God, Vishnu, incarnating to teach, standing up for justice, and you got to fight, and you got to do your duty in karma yoga, and you got to battle evil when you see it, and then you got Buddha saying, surrender. If somebody's going to come and kill you, then, so that's more of like somebody who truly wants to transcend.
Okay.
right?
Okay, I think I slowly start getting it. What also crossed my mind was that it always depends on what level I'm at, and yeah. Nah, never mind. But whatever. It's it's almost like why am I thinking about what I'm, why are my thoughts going out there anyways? Thinking about all that, like why I'm not just resting and observing and taking in the information. Why am I making it a big deal in a way and keep thinking about it, and instead of like taking in the information, which means that I'm just in my thinking mind, that there is not much awareness present. Because when I look back during the times when there's a lot of awareness present, this chatter wouldn't arise. There was just like, this is happening, that is happening, that happened in history, that happened in history. And there's almost like just a constant unfolding spontaneously. And in those states, one doesn't know what one is capable of or not capable of. So even thinking now, when I'm in that state and something, would maybe happen, something violent, and because you're like in those states, you're coming also from wisdom, and like you will know what to do and what is appropriate. And sometimes you do things that are seemingly inappropriate, but they are coming from wisdom, so they are appropriate. So it's like, I think my only problem here is why I don't understand it is because I'm on a low level at the moment. It's like I'm Sabina, I'm this identified being, I don't want to fight, I have these opinions, I have these belief systems that I really believe in. This shouldn't be this way, this shouldn't be this should be this way. And so I think that it will all fall apart, all this doubt about this or that, is it right, is it wrong, when I'm just like rising up in awareness, which I will have to do now, because it's like it's painful to be in this state. It's like so much confusion.
So I think I got it though. I think I got the missing link.
What is
the missing link for you, Sabina? Because we've studied a lot of spiritual teachings and teachers, but there's one missing link that Sabina has not yet studied. The Bhagavad Gita. I think that's going to be it. I think once we start watching that and then getting into it, and then of course we're going to have our own discussions, and I'm going to talk about it from my understanding. But usually my understanding really helps, Sabina. It's helped in the past. And then, because there is some teachings from Krishna that, once you get it, it's like, war, no spoilers, but might be the missing link that Sabina needs. So excited for the Bhagavad Gita. So if you enjoyed this video and our discussion all about war and spirituality, please hit that like button. Yes. Remember to subscribe. It really, really helps the channel. Let us know what you think down in the comments, and any details, what you guys think about Sabina's dilemma. Did we touch on it? Do we know what we're talking about, or what? If you're excited for the Bhagavad Gita, let us know. Because most important is to raise yourself.
And raise this beautiful world. Thank you so much, everyone. And a very special thank you to our world yogi, Paro. We love you.
Peace.